it is one more project from my wish list. I wanted to make such a crescent moon wreath like this creator did for a very long time, but I just carried this project over to a better moment, because I don't really like the idea of dried flowers. I think they will be damaged too soon and lose their color as well, although it is just a supposition. And if we replace these dried flowers by something, we still need to make this something from foam yarn, cold porcelain, polymer clay or any other kind of material. And at that moment Rosalina texted me and suggested making a video together. I was familiar with her channel because to a greater extent it is devoted to making polymer clay flowers, so I realized that the moment had come. We agreed that she would make some flowers and send them to me, so after the watching of my video, go to her channel and subscribe. Finally, I have received the parcel, and it's so huge! If you watched my and Anya's video, you might remember my emotions back then, and now this parcel is also very heavy, and obviously inside there are not just large flowers. To be frank, I have the same feelings as when you open your birthday gift. Just have a look what's inside. Reindeer moss. It is not stabilized or dyed, it is natural and has its innate smell. It is so valuable. Also, there was a whole bunch of dried flowers. Just look at this beauty. The flowers themselves were also in there. Look how unusual they are. There was also a whole bracelet, and it perfectly matches my outfit and manicure. And also some tea and sweets. I had such a childlike delight because of all these presents, so Rosalina, I am extremely grateful. Inside there also was a lot of clay and resin produced by Cernit. I hope it should be pronounced like that. And this present came to me just in time, because I already have an oven for clay and I'm super close to finally delve into the polymer clay sculpting topic. Rosalina, just wanted to thank you one more time. And now let's get it started. We will make the base using twigs. You can take Virginia creeper, unfortunately not everyone has it. So the solution for you will be to make a besom from fallen birch twigs. You can find them under every self-respecting birch. I sorted them out and trimmed off some twigs from the branches. I had been thinking a lot how to better make it, because the twigs naturally didn't want to bend as I wanted them to. Well, the best solution is to take two similar twigs, one of the ends should be hard and the other end must be with some tiny twigs. I put them tops to tails and bind the hard twig with the thinner ones and make a knot, but don't trim off the thread. Next, I collect the other end and bend the twigs, pulling the thread to them. Bind the twigs and make a knot. That's how we get a frame. It looks like a bow. Next, I clamped it in the middle and started taking the twigs of different lengths and put them tops to tails again, to achieve the equal number of thick and thin twigs, top and bottom. I tied the twigs with the thread in the place where I have been just holding them, and without trimming it off, I continue binding the twigs, pressing them to the frame. Keep tightening it going down the frame, bind it several times on the end and make a new loop which will hold the ends of the crescent. I tightened them more securely. If you look closer, you will see that the previous thread has become quite looser. Then you can keep making the wreath bigger. I add under the thread some solid twigs and then bind them on the middle. Then I do the same thing on the other side. And again, bind the whole crescent using a thread, because all the twigs have different lengths. To avoid sticking out, we must secure this construction, and at the same time I tied it very gently without using much force. And the distance between the skeins is quite big. It will be better seen on some closer shots. Then I add the twigs once more, not from the very edge of the crescent, but in this place. Pay your attention to this moment. I formed the crescent, adding the twigs to the sides, avoiding the top, as I don't want my moon to be that volume, because later I will place the flowers on top. After that, I tightened the crescent again, and finally I achieved the right shape I was happy about. Next, I decided to paint it. It was not really necessary. However, birch twigs have such a grayish, cold shade, and I love when wood has a warm shade. So I took my favorite wood stain and started trying to paint over this wreath. Painting the twigs separately would be much tedious. What I did was simply pouring the wood stain inside using a brush. The result turned out well. Next, I decided to straighten it using white craft glue. Kind of like the bark in travnik, glue will help the wreath to keep the shape, especially when I will cut the thread. Plus, no twigs will ever fall off. Squeeze the glue like some ketchup on a hot dog and spread it thinly using a brush. By the way, it is very important to do it on every side. When the main part of the glue has dried up, we can take on the decor. Have a look, only some small drops remained. They need a bit more time, but that's okay. These are the flowers and leaves from Rosalina. The full video on how to make them you may find on her channel. The link will be in the description. Gluing parts of the decor on such an uneven surface is better using a glue gun, but I had taken away mine from the studio at the moment of the shooting, so I had to somehow write out the situation. I was thinking how to place them, and as a result, I made this simple composition. I began to attach everything making big drops of superglue. Actually, this is not the proper way to use it. Eventually, it took a lot of time for glue to dry, and the wreath was still flimsy, but that was fine. Whilst the wreath was drying up, I decided to make the crystals. I didn't have much time, so I took my epoxy pro resin, which dries for 24 hours. I mixed the resin in the 1:2 ratio and left it for a while till all the bubbles were out. Recently, I've used the nail powder for crystals. This time, I made a decision to apply the powder more carefully using a fluffy brush. The play of colors will be partially seen on some parts of the gem. It will also have no clear edges. Then I poured some transparent resin inside as well as into the crystal molds. Only after that I remembered that I had poured resin into a plate first for a particular reason. I wanted to add some powder in it to see what would happen, because I had never done this before, and many people asked me what might happen if you add exactly this powder into transparent resin. And I have no idea what will happen because I never tried doing so. In fact, this time I haven't achieved the result which this powder might give, because later I added some other flakes into it. But it's okay, we still have a lot of topics for the future videos. I decided to color the resin with acrylic paint and pigments. Epoxy Max has such new pigments available. They are like flakes of snow. To be frank, I had broken the box, so I had to suffer a little to open it. The charm of this glitter you will see in the final result of the work. I mixed the resin with powder and poured a drop into each crystal. Next, I colored the resin with a drop of paint and added a drop into each crystal again. I do not use a syringe, although it would make the process more convenient, because next I'm going to color the same resin, changing the shade. I added a bit of resin with glitter and carefully mixed it inside to make a gradient. So I kept adding different shades into the crystals, sometimes blending the borders between the colors. When I continued working without a camera, I ran out of pink resin, dyed resin. However, there were some spaces left in the crystals, and I had to choose something, like to color the resin again in pink, but these crystals were already very pink, there was quite enough of it, so I decided to take green. I simply remembered that there is a gem which is called watermelon tourmaline. Just look at it. But till the very end I was afraid that my crystals might turn into a swamp, but it never happened. To take the crystals out of such molds, you have to untuck the upper part, then twist it this way and ease it, pressing the mold in the bottom, and the crystal will be gradually squeezing out. See, the glitter I have told you about has different shapes and sizes, and it seems to me that it gives the crystal such natural realism. I also glued little flowers which I associated with little stars to the wreath. They suited the crescent very well, but still I felt that this moon had lack of something. I took reindeer moss, but it didn't match the crescent. For all its awesomeness, I wanted something more vibrant. Yeah. I keep with my traditions. I guess that when the most loyal subscribers saw the wood stain on screen, you knew that this would happen, am I right? I mixed the moss with glue to better secure it on the surface under the flowers and leaves, so that it won't crumple and it will stick well. Moreover, the leaves and flowers will also stick better this way. Besides, I do love the color of the leaves which Rosalina made. They are kinda green and at the same time have burgundy tips, and it gives them a magic look and make them match the whole composition well. Now we can trim off the ends and take up weaving a dream catcher. At first, I thought to take a jute thread or brown yarn, but then I found a waxed burgundy cord, which perfectly matched the crescent. The most difficult thing was to run a thread through the twigs, which I have just glued. I made a knot, and next I needed to decide where the next knots would be. It is super important to make each section one and the same length, so before the beginning, measure everything visually, which length should each section has and where they should be attached to each other. Then I suffered from running a needle through the crescent again, and this loop twisted a little bit several times. Not a big deal, but try watching more carefully the thread to avoid such kinks. You can loosen a thread and it will untwist by itself if something was wrong. Well, no matter how you run the thread through the crescent, top down or down top, what important is, before you make the next step, you have to make a loop. In other words, to run the thread through the length section, which you have just made, to make the thread kink in this place, and then strain the thread. To make the next length section, I measured the already made one and began to run the thread through the crescent again. You will hardly see it under the flowers, but I hope that this stage is clear. It is better to weave a dream catcher before you make your decor on the crescent, because it will be extremely hard to make new glue coats avoiding the weaving. Then I hit upon the idea of taking a pin. I attached the thread to it, so it could help me to stretch the thread. Well, when I ran the thread through the crescent for the last time, it was the end of the first stage. Next, we will mostly do the same steps, but in the opposite direction. First, we need to make a knot on the end to fasten off a thread. And it's really important to control how the previous threads were stretched. Next, we go to the middle of this length section and run the thread through from top to bottom. Then from up to down it goes through that very loop which I have just made. In other words, we get such a loop, which must be exactly in the center of the length section. Strain the thread and move on to the next section. I hold the thread strained with one hand and tie it with the other one from up to down. Then we need to pull it from the bottom up in the loop we make. And here we go again. Look, I hold the thread strained with one hand and with another hand I tie the section. Next you should go back here. To that end, I make a simple knot. You might hold the thread with your finger cushion or nail. It is highly important to do so, because it must be really tense, and also because we already have a whole weave, or rather a half of it. And make a knot with the other hand. To fix it from slipping off, as it can freely go up and down, I have glued the knot using white craft glue, which, as you already know, will become transparent after drying up. When it have already dried up a bit, you can continue weaving, similarly as before, but now we go in the opposite direction. Here is one more knot from which I go backwards. I did this and that and decided to stop. I mean, you could connect it this way, but I decided not to do so. Cover the knot with some glue, and when it has almost dried up, literally just on the sides, I cut off the thread. Now we can 100% take off the thread which kept our crescent in the right shape, because now it is tightened with our weaving. What we need to do further is to somehow attach the crystals to the threads. I planned to tie them round with the help of a wire, but I had only this colored one, and perhaps it was initially meant for bead weaving. The perfect choice here would be a glue gun, but as I didn't have it, I had to find another solution. I tied knots on the ends of the threads and tried attaching them with superglue. Perhaps the wire was too thin, or I just absolutely don't know how to work with it. To make the story short, this variant was a fail. I even made a construction where you could run a thread through, but it was a failure. Polymer clay also didn't fit, because how do I suppose to bake it? But I remembered about paper clay. It dries up by itself and quite fast. I sculpted maybe a bit peculiar cup heads, because I had such associations in my mind while making them. They dried up pretty fast, and I began to paint them. I took brown and gold paints. And I also wanted to add a certain specialness. So I took a neon pink and purple. Great. The last thing to do was to tie all these. Speaking about the main gem, it was quite easy, because all you need to do is simply to pierce through the crescent and tie a knot above. After that, I secured it with some glue, and these gems below were a real trouble. The problem was also in the way it was lying. I thought that the gems would lie evenly, but when let me take it. Actually, initially I wanted to place it here, but not all my viewers like spoilers in the background. Now there are flowers, as it is summer outside, and I have no idea what I will put here in winter. The crescent can be hung differently. While it was lying on my table, I thought that the crystals were evenly attached, but when I hung it as I wanted, it turned out that the crystals were attached crooked. It would be better if you first hung the crescent, and while it would be hanging, you would attach the bottom details. That's practically it. Well, No, in fact, there is one more crucial moment. Many of you who like the topic of magic and nature have already recognized the decker and the moon which weekends make. Let me hang it and tell you. Wait a sec. It seems like you can't see it. I'll just put it here, because I need to make some photos first. Wicca is a contemporary pagan religion, if we can say so. Wiccans are white witches, and if I'm not mistaken, this symbol right now belongs to them, but maybe they have just popularized it, as somebody might use it before. I didn't make any research about the history of this symbol, but the idea is that nowadays in Wicca it is the symbol of the goddess, and it stands for feminine aspect of spirit and connected to female mysteries and healing. And it also stands for 3 main moon phases. If I got it right, these crescents, which are just crescents, originate as a part from this main symbol. It means that, for a good reason, there are many of the wreaths with dream catchers and with flowers. Perhaps it is just a popularization as well as a dream catcher. I don't know. I have been exploring this question for a very long time, because this connection between a wreath and Wiccan was stopping me from uploading this video. The reason was like that: I do not identify myself as a Wiccan. I simply like the magic and nature topic separately from the religion. And for me it is... I have no idea how to better explain this. It is just what is close to my soul, this magic, forest, and so on. But I've never attached a spiritual meaning to these things. I think this is the best explanation of how I understand it. Actually, it is a very complicated topic. Such things to me are purely pretty to look at elements of the decor. But I have been confused for a very long time with the question of, isn't it the depreciation of the things which are spiritual to the others? Because it would be a different matter if I just made it and put it on the wall, but I'm telling you about it. And at the same time, a dream catcher is extremely popularized. Although it initially had its spiritual purposes, I don't think that all the people who have it attach such initial sense to it. Moreover, as it is written in the encyclopedia about pagan deities of Western Europe, the basic postulate of Wicca can be represented like this: as long as you aren't harming anyone, do as you wish. So I hope that I don't harm anyone or hurt anyone's feelings by this video. Write down in the comments whether it would be interesting for you to see one more video about a dream catcher, and tell me please, was my explanation of how to weave clear or not, because when I was rewatching this video I understood that some things should have been shot from different angles. So I guess I will think over some more similar projects for you. Use the link in the description to see Rosalina's video about the flowers she made, and also subscribe to her channel. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. I'm so grateful to my sponsors for support. I love all of you this much. Bye.